Hello, James. How you doing?
I'm doing. How are you?
I'm also doing, and you know what? I have been doing playing a lot of Victoria 3 in the past few
I,
days.
I do know that because I've been playing it with you.
So, James, what would you describe Victoria 3 as if you had to go simply with it?
I had to go simply with it. It's a grand strategy game from Paradox. Similar to others they do like Crusader Kings and EU4. But the focus in Victoria 3, as far as I can tell, it seems to be economy. That's one of the main sort of driving focuses of the game.
Yeah, I mean, from what we've played, it is like a giant Excel spreadsheet, and I'm saying that in the best of ways.
Yes, it's exactly what we love. The numbers, the balancing of a market that is, driven by supply and demand. It's perfect for people like us.
Exactly. People that love just staring at numbers all day and just watching them go up and down, tweaking stuff until you get the right numbers, and then something will happen, and then the wrong numbers will appear. And that's pretty much what we did for like 8 hours the other day.
Well, I mean, you sort of did it the other way around. You
Right.
tweaked it until there were wrong numbers, and then you were like, why are there wrong numbers?
Okay, that did happen a little bit, which we'll get into,
lot.
I'm sure, in a bit, as you flame me even more. So I think it's based during the Victorian era. It's between, when does it start? Is it 1840?
1838, I think, is the start date.
So 1838, and then finishes, I guess, early 1900s, right? 1920 something.
I don't actually know when it ends.
Somewhere into like the.
I think it
World War
goes
I
about
stuff
80
era, right?
years. So yeah, it'd be 1920ish.
Yeah, I think most of them last for around that long. Not that we've got that far in. I think we'd have to be playing for a few more hours in our campaign.
Yeah, just a handful.
And maybe not restarting as much as we did.
Yeah, maybe not, driving our economies into the ground.
I don't know what you're talking about. About. So we started a campaign the other day. I think we got it a day early, didn't we? So we managed to get a bit.
We did get it a day early, yes.
So we've been playing for a few days now. And initially, I started as Portugal. You started as Denmark.
Denmark, yep.
And I think we started in various different situations, didn't we? My starting country was quite poor, running a big deficit. My people were all just farmers.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, my country was the same, I just changed it a lot quicker than you did.
All right.
No, you had a much larger population, obviously Portugal being involved rather heavily in colonization. It meant that you had more disparate population, whereas I was quite focused in Denmark with only a minor colonial presence.
Yeah, that was one of the things I realised, like, after staring at my country trying to work out why my numbers weren't going correctly, and then I looked around and I was like, oh, I have colonies as well, don't I? And then had to manage those as well, which is always fun.
Yeah. You also, for a large portion at the start of the game, didn't employ any of your people and wondered why they weren't paying tax.
That did happen, but to be fair, it was mainly because I was doing stuff like getting better farms and all that basic stuff where people barely pay any income tax.
Yeah.
It was all very basic jobs because I just had to get to the point where my people were getting fed. And it was very much...
You very much started the game with a collapsing economy as opposed to my semi-stable economy.
Yeah, we both decided to play quite minor nations at the beginning because we wanted to get the gist of it without having too much to manage, which I think was a good way of doing it.
Don't want to be overwhelmed by playing as France or Great Britain.
Oh god, yeah, if it started with that, all the numbers would have just been too much. It would have just been hell.
All the numbers.
All the numbers. So I think, the primary thing at the beginning was getting our economies in some form of order, and also just learning how the game works as a whole.
Very much a trial by fire. We just sort of jumped into it. And failed multiple times until we, figured out how it worked, roughly.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't restart that many times. It's only
I didn't.
I think initially I was trying to get my economy in order, and I just kept like all my budget up, and I had to go in my second campaign. I think I had to just go full scorched earth style, lower all my budget on everything, pay my people nothing, just to kind of balance that economy out, get some.
Yeah, I think it was, it was that thing of it. It felt very negative to start by lowering your wages for people and increasing taxes and stuff. But it turns out that, you know, at the start of the game, that generally is the better thing to do. Take those early hits so that you can start growing your economy sooner, and then it'll just, you know, it'll feed itself from there.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we got that initial economy going. I mean, the way it works is you have your basic goods that you need, like your peasants and stuff. Well, everyone requires food. I was about to say your peasants require food, but you also have
peasants require food. If they're rich, they don't need food.
Yeah, I think they just need money.
Photosynthesize.
Yeah, at that point, they're rich enough to do that. They just gain the ability. But yeah, so initially it was getting that food, getting clothes for people, those very basic necessities, which I was struggling with initially, because I just had so many people that needed stuff, and I think from the looks of it, they were all walking around naked and not eating, which is a great way to run your country.
I think they're still walking around naked, aren't they? You still have a clothes shortage, don't you?
No, I think I just solved the clothes shortage, actually.
I see.
Now I've got the problem of clothes are too cheap and all my manufacturers are losing money now, but that's a problem for the future, you know? But yeah, no, so it's definitely getting those initial goods sorted and then watching your economy slightly go up where you can invest into other stuff. Especially when I think at one point you needed a lot of iron. And
oh yes,
I had an iron, you know, the ability to build an iron mine in the south of my country, which was quite a low populated area. And I just started turning it into this big iron producing thing, and you just kept exporting it.
That was one of the benefits of playing multiplayer with someone, was that Denmark, no access to iron, absolutely none. But as you might imagine, with industrialization, iron and, you know, by extension steel and all that sort of stuff, quite vital. So being able to have someone who I could just say, you know, you can produce it, do that, I'll buy it from you. It worked out quite nicely for me.
Yeah, it was a great little relationship they had going, and it worked out well for me because my people got jobs and I made money from exporting the iron, which is actually kind of good example.
You only had to pay the minor price of relying entirely on my economy for yours to stay afloat.
That is true. You did stop building stuff, and my iron price
was
just
quite funny,
drastically reduced, which I guess just shows how interweaved the economies are. And how it's fine for us when we can kind of talk to each other, but if you're relying on an AI that much, I feel like you could be really screwed over very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it's completely based on supply and demand, and, you know, each country at the start of the game starts with their own market, but there's also the opportunity, as you did in one of our failed attempts at a game, of joining someone else's market, joining their customs union, which can then obviously change the entire complexion of markets. You know, if you're trading with one and then they join someone else's customs union, all of a sudden all the goods that you might have been importing or exporting have different values in this new market. So you have to constantly keep an eye on it to make sure that everything is as profitable as you think it is.
Yeah, I remember it was in that last campaign we were doing when I joined the UK's market, and one of the most interesting things of that is I got access to opium, and my people immediately started just wanting opium, and I eventually left the customs union because I was like, this is actually really bad for my economy because I was exporting an awful lot, and suddenly my people had the need for opium, and I was like, oh, this is buggered. This has gone wrong real quick. Which is it's quite a funny bit with the pops. Like, the more you give them, the more they then expect.
Yeah, you'll make them happy, and if they stay happy for a period of time, then if you make them even slightly unhappy, revolution. So immediately they want your head.
Yeah. If you start running the country into the ground, or paying people less, or pissing them off, revolutions are a thing.
Or if you just, you know, if a trade thing falls through because you're obviously relying on another market for a basic good, and suddenly your people don't have as much of it, they think, oh, but we had it, so we were entitled to it, and therefore we hate you now.
Yeah, they're very unforgiving. I mean...
Yeah, they are very unforgiving.
I guess it's easy for us to say, you know. Are you a monarchy in yours? I can't remember. Did you change to...
I was a monarchy. I'm now a parliament.
Ooh, look at you with your
No, that's not true. I'm a president. I can't remember which way I went.
Yeah, because I think we ended up having very different economies. I remember initially, like, I was like, oh, I'm going to make, like, a lovely utopia in Portugal, and then I realised very quickly that was not going to happen with the stuff I had.
Whereas I did make a utopia in Denmark relatively easily, because I just had significantly less people to please.
Yeah, that's the issue I had, was I had way too many people to please, and then I realised I'm going to have to start cracking down now. So I ended up putting some laws in for, I think I went first autocracy to give myself more authority, so I could start charging certain, not consumer taxes? No, consumption taxes on particular goods, which is a great way to get money, which basically means they pay you extra for using them. So I ended up getting autocracy, getting a load of authority, and really kind of going down this route of this autocratic government. I was a monarchy. I ended up getting a secret police because my dissidents kept going up because they weren't happy with how I was running the country.
They are still going up. They are still rocketing.
They are.
Though most of the problem now is that you're taking other people's land.
Yeah.
In true colonizing style.
Yes, that is very true. So yeah, we ended up going down very different government types. Where I went on a very autocratic, horrible. Like, my people didn't have many rights. My laws were mostly based around making the rich people happy, so they didn't come for my head. Whereas you had a much more multicultural.
Yeah. I mean, I've gone. I've opened up. I'm multicultural now. I got rid of my monarchy to become a president. I am still an oligarchy, so it's not perfect. But got to keep some level of authority so that I can still make money. There'll always be that aspect to it. Another thing that I started with that you didn't was actually a good literacy rate amongst my population, which was really useful in the early game for getting some of the technologies a little bit faster, which can increase your production efficiencies and can increase your government functions so that you have more bureaucracy and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, which is bureaucracy is one of the most important things as well, which was something that was really hurting me. So
especially early game when you have no trade agreements, any trade route you make costs bureaucracy. Once you get trade agreements, they're free in bureaucracy cost.
Yeah, exactly.
But it was a big limitation for both as early game.
Yeah, because one of the things you need to, generally, depending on how you want to run your economy, obviously you go, I'll bring in the cheap goods, I'll make expensive goods, and I'll export them, which is, kind of how you want to really have your economy. But the problem with that is, especially at the early game, is you need the bureaucracy to be able to support bringing all that trade in and getting those cheaper goods, which was kind of why I ended up going agrarian with it, because I ended up having so many people that I needed to feed. I had to actually invest in these kind of farms and basic necessities rather than importing.
You have to get them to feed themselves.
Yes, exactly.
Essentially.
And I think bureaucracy goes up with the amount of population you have and stuff like that. So it's
there's a cost, for your population, which obviously you being a larger country meant that it was even more of a problem for you.
Definitely.
I mean, but there's also the element of, even after solving the bureaucracy problem with trade, I've been having a tremendous problem with convoys, so the actual ships that are responsible for bringing the goods in and exporting them. Because I'm such a small country and I don't produce much raw resource of my own, I'm actually trading a vast amount, and so I'm constantly running out of the port capacity for these convoys, which obviously limits my expansion and stuff.
Yeah, you had nearly double the amount of ships as me, because you were such a small nation. You had to, because that's the thing, I could build and invest in that kind of basic necessities, whereas you had to bring everything in because you were such a small nation.
I didn't have the population, and I don't have the land to actually exploit. I don't have all the mine capacity. I mean, I have no capacity for iron mines in all of my land, so I have to pay for that in convoys. I have to bring everything in.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting way of how it, the difference between those kind of larger countries and smaller countries. You can still play it rather well because, again, very different situations, different populations, but you manage to kind of thrive very quickly with it. But then again, you kind of meet an end where you kind of need to
I've hit an upper limit now that requires me to change how I'm doing things.
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of those.
Whereas you're
things.
now sort of getting into your stride. You've dealt with the immediate sort of providing for people, and now you're able to really use the land that you have available to you.
Exactly, yeah. Now, one of the things that was I mean, we've gone over this a little bit, but the government and laws mechanics are very interesting, with having to balance the dissidents and loyalists and the different factions within it. So I think to name a few, you have like landowners, industrialists. You have, is it intelligentsia?
The intelligentsia, yeah.
Yes, there's quite a few of those. There's one
you
more.
Have the ruralists
and the church.
Obviously the church, in whatever religious capacity that country has. So whether it's Catholic, Protestant, or anything like that.
Which was extremely big for me at the beginning, because I remember I guess Portugal, very Catholic country, but I kept having priests turn up that had done something horrible. We can only imagine what. And at the beginning, the Catholic Church was so powerful, I kind of had to keep going, oh shit, if I expose these scandals, I'm in trouble, because they will have my head. And then later on, I managed to kind of push the church out of the government a little bit more.
Yes, which I've also done as well. Funny how that works out.
I know, it's almost like you probably shouldn't have religious institutions in your government.
Yeah, it's weird that. But it's the same sort of thing with landowners. I've pushed the landowners out of my government because I'm no longer a monarchy. When you're a monarchy, the landowners have such a huge sway on what you do, and quite often they will clash with the intelligentsia, with the industrialists. So if you're going that sort of route, you're gonna have a tough time with the landowners. I've gone through, I've got a presidency now. And it means that the landowners don't have as much sway over the leader, and I've been able to push them out even further.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think in my government, because I'm still a monarchy, the landowners hold such power in my nation. It's crazy.
Yeah. And it's it's all about who is powerful as to what laws you can enact, what direction you can take your country, because obviously they all want different things, and the more powerful ones are gonna cause more of a problem if you don't please them. If you do something, I've had a law where I think this was actually my single player playing as Sweden. I tried to get some colonization laws, but the intelligentsia and industrialists were not having it. They were not happy, and they were the most powerful in my country. So once I passed the law, they immediately said, "We want you to take it back, or we're gonna cause problems." And the number of radicals in my country skyrocketed. So I had to very quickly revoke those changes.
One of the things we were definitely focusing on, which your literacy rate definitely helped you with, I think, is research, which
Absolutely.
is very important. I remember multiple times throughout where I'd realized that I'd researched a new technology, implement it in your, whatever manufactory you have or farm or whatever, and it increases the production massively.
It can, because, especially, as you get into the later game, it becomes even more valuable, because the more you have of a certain production line, the more those changes actually benefit you. So, in the early game, you may have one farm, so a new farming technique, it's still valuable. You're getting more of a yield for, one of the earliest ones is, you can get more grain from your farms in return for using fertilizer. And fertilizer can come from an animal farm which consumes grain and also gives you leather and meat. And so you can sort of make this cyclical thing, and what you can do is upgrade, sort of both of them at the same time, so it's each individual building with all of its people is producing more.
Just keep increasing the yields and keep increasing the money, and then you can
And one of the big things I've noticed in the technology we're getting to now is actually technologies that increase more automation and therefore lower the population it takes. Now, for a country like Denmark, I'm significantly smaller than you. I am running out of population constantly. So being able to get these technologies that free up a bunch of population means I can then build more production chains.
Yeah, whereas me, with the massive population, it's not as many. It's not getting the people. Getting some of the more educated people is more difficult for me, because my literacy rate was abysmal, to put it lightly.
I started with a decent one, although I will say mine is I'm dropping in standings in the world. People are growing a lot faster than me. It's something I do need to address to be able to stay on the cutting edge of these technologies.
Yeah, I don't think most of my people don't know how to read. And so far, it hasn't been a massive issue. But I'm sure as we get into more and more advanced jobs, that will become a problem.
Yeah, I think it's definitely more valuable for smaller countries because it's the efficiency that you're really gaining there. And when you have, a large country with lots of land and loads of natural resources, you don't need to be efficient initially with it. But, you very quickly reach that limit as a smaller country, and so you do need to drag all the efficiency out of it. So having those brand new production lines, brilliant.
Yeah, and you also have to keep in my case, you have to keep into account when you improve the yield of something, the effect that it has in your economy overall can be drastic. I've had it in times where I increase it to a new production method that needs something. I think, for example, I started using explosives in my mine, which needs fertilizer. Oh no, it needs a chemical plant which produces fertilizer and explosives, obviously, to use it, which drags up the price of those explosives because you start using it on all your mines, and then the price of your materials goes up, and it affects the entire economy throughout. So it's a big balance.
And the game does a reasonable job of trying to show you some of the effects it will have, but at the same time, it generally goes so much further than the game will show you. The game will show you sort of the direct relationship it would immediately have, but quite often the best way of doing things is to link a few changes together. So you don't just want to upgrade something to use explosives. What you want is to increase, sulfur production, explosive production, and then start using explosives sort of all at the same time to get the most efficiency out of it.
Yeah, but as we've found throughout, it's not always easy to keep building when you're running. No. You do not want to run too much of a deficit in this game, which was a mistake I made in the initial one.
But at the same time, you don't want to run too much of a surplus because you don't want to cap out on money and not be spending it. It can actually have a negative effect on your economy. So you have to sort of balance how much you're building and to make sure that you're staying pretty much around zero. You don't have a surplus, you don't have a deficit. You want to say sort of exactly even.
Exactly.
It's a very difficult balance to strike.
It is. It's just the one more building thing was a thing we had a lot, where it's just like, I'm in 500k debt, one more building, it'll help me get out of this. And then you watch your debt tick up and the interest tick up. It's like, okay, I can probably do one or two more of these before I start losing money.
Yeah.
And then you eventually have to start not cutting taxes, increasing taxes and cutting workers' wages and stuff.
You have to pay so much attention and keep checking all aspects of what's going on, how much you're producing, how much you're trading, all this sort of stuff. You really need to keep an eye on it. It means you constantly have something to look at if you want to do it properly.
One of the things I've completely forgotten is colonization, which is obviously a huge part of the game.
Yeah.
So the way it seems to work, because I started off with a couple colonies because I was Portugal and they were being formed, and I noticed it had 8,000 days on it, which is quite a significant amount of days.
Yes.
Especially with the way the time pacing works. 7,000 days isn't a short amount of time.
No.
And the way it seems to work is it's based on the population of your country and also a few institutions you can invest in to improve colonization. And I definitely found even with my population, which was a bit higher than yours, I was slow compared to those superpowers like France and Britain.
Yeah.
So
it is heavily reliant on population. You can also get, as you say, through the institutions, extra efficiency so that you have a bit more progress per population. And it with the colonization, it starts out unlike a war where you're trying to take an entire state. With the colonization, you sort of chip away at a state bit by bit, and these tiny little provinces will get colonized, so that bit by bit you sort of swallow up this state in Africa or India or wherever you do it.
Yeah, wherever you're going. You've done a couple wars so far, haven't you? I can't remember if
I've done a couple in
campaign.
my single player, but not in our multiplayer. Denmark have been a bit too weak for wars so far.
I guess the lack of the population is not gonna help you if you having rampaging armies killing everyone in your provinces might not be the best.
No.
it's got a very different system to how normal Paradox games go, how EU4 is, and
it took us a while to figure out what was going on.
Oh yeah, we sat there watching these diplomatic plays come up initially, and was like, what's going on? We can join this? We can join a war randomly in this random African nation side and stuff like that.
Or if we're going to declare a war, everyone else could join, but they may join or they may not join, or
Yeah.
In a lot of previous Paradox games, it's quite clear cut as to who would or wouldn't join a war. It sort of tells you. Whereas in Victoria 3, it's not as simple.
Which, I mean, I guess opens itself up to, how complicated real life situations like that were.
Yeah.
Where you start a diplomatic play for, I don't know, example, South Africa, and Britain goes, no, I wanted that land. They may support the enemy. They may go onto the enemy's side throughout. I think it's split into 3 different kind of stages. So you've got like your opening move where you kind of go, I want to go to war with this country. I would like this bit of land. And, the enemy country goes, oh, okay, this is what's happening. And then I think it moves on to the other countries being able to put inputs in, which is basically them going, do I want to support the enemy?
So there's like the initial declaration, and then, the of your intention. And then there's this period, before the war starts where, there's the opportunity for forces to mobilize, for each country to size each other up, and then for external countries to say, oh, actually, I'm going to lean in favor of this person and support them.
I think also it affects, if say you put like, oh, I want this state, and Britain goes, that's fine, I don't care about that one. But if you add an extra state that they're interested in, it makes them more likely to join. I've also noticed you can add little extra bits, so you could say, oh, Britain, if you join, I will give you this state, and they may be more likely to join. You can do these little tweaks to try and get people on your side or not. You can also do stuff like ban slavery. So I guess if there's a country that's really going for that, and you go, oh, I'm going to make them ban slavery, they may be more interested in helping you out in that endeavor. But I quite like the system now. I'm getting a bit more used to it. Now I know you kind of have to weigh up stuff, and I think you can pull out immediately in the first stage. I think it gets locked in eventually in the third stage. I think when
when it's escalating to war. That's sort of when it's all been decided, and you're now just waiting to start. You're doing your final preparations. But there is the opportunity during a lot of it, before the war actually starts, to actually back down and say, actually, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be a part of this.
And also, there's an option for the side you're attacking to just go, I'm gonna lose terribly in this war. I've got no chance of winning. You know what? I'll just give you what you want, and there'll be no war for it. Which is obviously quite a nice thing compared to the other Paradox games, where I think in EU4 there's like a threaten war button, which kind of does that. You can like a province at a time. Whereas this is a bit more of a dedicated system for it, which is quite good.
And I like the way it gives you that sort of countdown time. You can see how forces are mobilizing, who's going each way before you make that decision of whether you're going to fight it or whether you are going to have to concede.
Well, I guess it's kind of like, almost you might be bluffing. So I noticed, especially with the first Nation Africa attack, I think it's someone in South Africa, and they were absolutely on board with the war originally until I mobilized my troops and started getting them into position. Because, I mean, it's theoretically possible.
They were like, oh, this is real.
Wait, they're actually going to do it. Yeah, and I think because it is possible that, say, I didn't have enough convoys, or I didn't have the supplies to actually, move my men. On paper, I could say I had 30 battalions, right? But I may not be able to move them to the position or supply them with any kind of weapons. So there's definitely that kind of thing of it, where they could actually just turn around and go, actually, you can't attack me here, so I'm not gonna, I'm not looking at just your numbers, I'm looking at where you've got them positioned, which is a much better way of doing it than just, oh, you've got more men than me overall, even though they're in a completely different part of the world.
I mean, the war, that, it sort of sums up the wars in this game. They require so much more thought than a lot of other Paradox games in terms of you have to analyze things for yourself. You have to figure out who's going to join based on how much they like you, how much they like the enemy, what interests they have in the region. You've also then got to think about, the soldiers that are fighting the war. It's not as simple as numbers, how many men you have. It's also about their equipment. What are you providing your men with compared to the enemy? So obviously you have a number of soldiers, but these troops also have a power projection, which is the game's sort of measurement of how effective they are comparative to each other. So you had a war in Africa where you had half the number of men as two African countries were fighting against you, but your men were so superior in their equipment and their training and all that sort of stuff that actually it was an easy war.
Yeah, no, it definitely makes a massive difference. And also, I think you can get like upgraded types of, you can upgrade from. I don't know what originally you use. Is it like I imagine like it's a matchlock type thing. I'm trying to think of the era of weapons, but you can upgrade to rifles at some point, which obviously gives you a massive advantage.
And you can change, how much artillery you're using and how many officers you have, whether you just got a large amount of chaff or whether you've got well structured. Army. It's there's a lot to it, so it's not just as simple as I have more numbers than them. They might have the highest quality army in the world and just batter you,
or a crazy good general. I mean, generals have traits and stuff in this, which bonuses depending on what kind of thing they're in. So I remember somehow, didn't you have one with like a psychotic trait who was a bit of a lunatic?
Yeah, one of my guys. I mean, the way the game described it, it called it a psychological deficiency or something, but it was basically saying they had a mental problem that at the time no one really knew what was going on, and so they would have been sort of shunned for it almost. So nowadays you'd probably call it depression or ADHD or something like that, but back then they had no idea, and the game expresses that.
Oh, he has a case of the big sads.
He's always got a frown on his face.
Yes, he's a very sad man. I don't know why I've gone into my typical Victorian British accent now. I was Portuguese. Yes. I don't know how to do colonial era Portuguese. Accent.
You don't know how to do modern era Portuguese.
That is also very true. You've got a good point there. Yep. But yeah, no, I think one of the most controversial things with the new thing, especially I've been reading a few of the reviews on Steam, and the front lines are very different to what you're used to in Paradox games. I mean, even compared to Hoi, which also has a front line system, you can still individually move those units around. Whereas in this, you get a designated front line that you kind of mobilize your battalions to. You set your generals on each front line, and it just kind of plays. You can give orders to them. You can say attack, defend, or I can't remember what the other was.
Yeah, you can give them sort of basic orders that say, what are you going to do on that front line? Are you going to be the attacker, or are you just defending that line? But then battles just seem to sort of pop up on that line with varying numbers of troops. We haven't done too much of the war, so I don't think either of us particularly know exactly how it works. I'm sure there's some sort of underlying system that if your troops can mobilize quicker or something, maybe you're more likely to get more men in each battle or something like that, but I don't know the intricacies yet. But it is just sort of, you get these battles popping up, and then there'll be a fight, and based on the outcome of those battles, one side may get to, if they're attacking, one side may get to actually push a little bit further, or they might lose the battle and they might lose a bit of ground. It just sort of plays out.
Which I can definitely see people who really enjoy the microing of the other Paradox games disliking, because it's definitely much more abstracted, and you have less of an effect. Once you set it in motion, it kind of just goes. Obviously, you can give orders, which you can defend to give your troops a bit of bit of some respite, rather than
there's no doubt that Victoria 3, it's not as focused on the combat. It's very much the economy and sort of the supply and production, as opposed to directly moving each unit and trying to tactically outplay your opponent in war. It's just a different style of game, and it's one that we both like, as we equally like the games like Hearts of Iron and EU4 that have a bit more in the way of conflict.
So yeah, I think overall, positive experience for Victoria 3 so far. We're enjoying it. We are only, I think, I've probably got like 10 hours, so again, not a crazy amount of...
We're not massive. I mean, it's only been out for 2 days now. Is this the second day it's been out? We got it a day early, so it's really not... We've not had it for loads of times, and already just loving it.
Well, thank you very much for joining me today, James. It's been a pleasure as always, and I'm sure we're definitely not going to play more Victoria 3 after this.
No, not directly after we stop the recording.
No, sleep is important.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. But anyway, guys, thank you for checking this out, and I'm sure we will have more Victoria 3 content in the future as we get to know it better. But for now, thanks for joining us.